Sorry, it's sci-fi fantasy today. I couldn't resist. Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. My name is Charlene and today we're going to be doing the second video in my One and Done series. So if you were here early on when my channel started, you will have seen the classics version of this video. But in case you weren't here, I'll kind of explain a bit about how this works. So my One and Done videos are meant to be a chance for you guys to, one, gain control of my reading for a few months, and also to kind of force me to give authors a second chance. So in the classics edition, I talked about 10 different authors who I had only read one of their books. And I really had no strong intentions of reading another book by them. For that one, you guys voted for East of Eden by John Steinbeck, but I did mention in that video that the poll I had put up on my community tab originally said classics were winning at the time that I was filming the video, but by the time I got done filming and was editing and needed a screenshot of it, sci-fi fantasy was actually winning. So I knew I wanted to do a second one of these videos, at least to do the sci-fi fantasy genre, so that way all of you who voted for that genre don't feel like your vote didn't matter. However, I think what I'm probably going to do is I will just go through the poll in order from the genres that got the most votes to the ones that got the least votes, and do one of these videos every 3 months until I've gone through all of the genres. And I just looked at it before I started filming. Historical fiction will be the next one. So that will be coming in November. So keep your eyes out for that one if you're interested in deciding when I get to read in historical fiction too. But for today, we're talking sci-fi fantasy. This one's going to be a little bit different than classics was. First of all, I'm really going to be pushing myself because you guys are actually going to get to pick 2 books for me to read instead of 1. That's the first difference, which with you guys having double the voting power, you also get double the choices, but they're in 2 different categories. So the first 10 authors you'll get to choose from are authors that I only read either 1 book by them and never read any more, or I read 1 full series of theirs and never read any other books or any other series by them. So you're going to get to pick one of those 10 authors and another book of theirs that you want me to read. The way the voting works is going to be the same as in the last video, and that is in the comments below. You can leave the name of the author in your comment that you want me to read, and if you have a specific book by that author you would like me to read, you can leave that as well. And again, this one will be, voting will be open through the end of August of 2024, which is when this video is coming out. So August 31st will be the last day to get your votes in. So if you're watching this video even a week after it comes out, you still have time to vote. But on September 1st, I will be tallying up all of the votes. The author who has the most votes is the author I will be reading from, and if that author has any specific books that have been voted on, that's the book that I will read. The book that has the most votes is the one that I will read. If there is a tie between authors, I get to choose which author. If there's a tie between books, I get to choose which of those books. However, if an author wins, but there are no books voted on, then I get to pick the book by that author. But it does still have to be that author. So you guys are free to take as much control as you want. As much or as little control as you want, actually. The next 10, technically, books that you get to vote on are for series that I started and I've never finished. And I may have read 1 book in the series, I may have read 2 or 3 books in the series, but I never finished the series. And at this point in time, they're not series that I Most of them are series that I'm not sure I ever will continue. And some of them are ones that I might, but they're pretty far down on my priority list at this point in time for different reasons. So you will get to vote on which series you want me to continue. And I'm pretty sure all of these, yes, all of these are just standard series where you read the books in order, not hop from here to here to here. So I will just be reading whatever book is next in the series that I would need to read. Those are the two that you get to vote on. Now, I'm going to do my best to finish both books by the end of November. Because the whole point with this is you guys vote on a book and I have 3 months in which to read it. Because there are 2 books, and because we're doing homeschool right now and everything else that's going on with that, for sure, one of the books will be done by the end of November, and I'm going to do my best to get both of them done. But if the second book's not done by the end of November, I will get it done as soon as I can, despite the historical fiction one and done. So, without further ado, because I feel like that was a really long introduction, let's go ahead and get into the books that you get to vote on. Okay, we're going to start with the first 10, which are the ones where you get to vote for the author and you get to vote for a specific book by that author. And the first 5 on here are ones that I read a full series by the author, but I've never read anything else. So the first one I'm listing, I had a hard time putting this list together because there are several I wanted to put on the list, but I know I have intentions to read more books by them, so it didn't make sense for them to be on the list. And then there were others that I did like their books, but they really haven't written much of anything else beyond what I did read. So there were cases where I was a little bit limited due to my own rules, but the first author is Stephenie Meyer. The only thing I've read by her is the Twilight series, all 4 books, plus I've read The Short Second Life of, is it Bree Tanner? I think is her name. I have not read Midnight Sun, nor do I have any intentions to, but I've read the rest of the books. I do know she has at least 2 other books that are standalones. She has The Host, and I think the other one's called The Chemist. I don't know for sure what she has beyond that, or Midnight Sun, which I guess, technically speaking, you could vote for Midnight Sun. I haven't read anything Twilight related since I was in college, but you are free to vote for that one too. Or if she has any other books out that I'm just not aware of, you could vote for those. So, like I said, I read the Twilight series. At the time I read it, I enjoyed a couple of the books not as much, and The Host was the only other thing I knew by her for a long time, and I just never got around to that one, and at this point haven't felt a need to pick it up, but that one is going to be choice number 1. Right. The second one is Jennifer A. Nielsen, and the series I read by her is the Ascendance trilogy. I'm going to specify trilogy because it was just a trilogy when I finished it. I'm going to put that one in quotes because I loved the first book, The False Prince. The second book, I did not enjoy as much. I struggled to get through that one. I actually DNF'd the third book. I read the synopsis for the rest of the book, so I did know how it ended, but I didn't technically finish the book. I do have one book by her on my shelves called Mark of the Thief. I do not own any other books by her, but I know she has a lot of other books out there. So if you think there are other books out there, could be other fantasy, could be historical fiction. I know this is sci-fi fantasy, but she does have other books that are not sci-fi fantasy, so I'm giving you free reign. I'm not saying because this is sci-fi fantasy you have to vote for a sci-fi fantasy book if you don't want to, just that all the books that I picked, or authors I picked, have to be ones that I read sci-fi fantasy by them. So you do have free reign with that one, but I know she has other fantasy out there as well if you'd like me to read one of those. All right, the next one, I know he was fairly popular at one point. I feel like there are still some people out there who really like him. The one series I read by him, though, made me not want to read anything else, but again, this is your vote, not mine. That is Garth Nix. And the one series I read by him was Keys to the Kingdom. And the biggest reason I didn't want to pick up any more books by him after finishing this one is because this was a roller coaster. This has honestly, probably one of my favorite books, especially middle grade fantasy books that I've read. And it also has one of my least favorite books of all time. And they were back-to-back books, by the way, in the series. So it was just kind of a feeling after I was done with the series. I also did not like the ending of the series. There was something about the ending that just bothered me. So I was not in a hurry to pick up any of his other books or series. I know he has one series that's fairly popular. I'll pop it up on the screen because it's a name I don't remember because it's a made-up name. But I know that one's been fairly popular. I don't know for sure what else he's written. But if there is a series or a book of his you would like me to read, feel free to vote for him. The next two I'm almost slightly questioning because I said the whole point is I have no intention to read anymore by these authors, but I do have books in my house by them. However, I constantly put off picking up other books by them, so I think they're still safe to be on the list. The next one is Stanley Robinson. The series I read by him is the Red Mars trilogy, which I loved. And I've thought about picking up other books by him, but I've just never been inclined enough to actually do so. He is, I guess I haven't been specified on this, but he is very much a sci-fi writer. So if there's a book of his you think I would enjoy, having enjoyed Red Mars as much as I did, feel free to vote for him and for another book of his for me to read. And the last one is Veronica Roth, which I just realized I hauled Chosen Ones by her not that long ago. But aside from just reading the synopsis, I really don't know anything about the book. And I could very easily see it being one that sits on my shelf for a very long time because I just avoid it. Possibly to the point that I just unhaul it without reading it. I don't know. So the only series I've read by her is the Divergent series. And this was a case of I liked the first book. I didn't care for the second one. And I didn't care for most of the third. I actually liked the ending of the third book, though. I feel like I'm in the minority on that one, but I actually liked that one. But after reading that series, was never inclined to pick up anything else by her. The only reason I have Chosen Ones is because my brother found it really cheap online. And I said, I can handle $2 or $3 for a book. So it's also one that if I got rid of it without reading it, it doesn't pay me that much because it was $2 or $3. But should I read another one of her books? You guys let me know. All right, and the last 5 for this section are authors that I only read one book by them and have never read anything else. The first one is Piers, who is a sci-fi author, and the one book I read by him is Omnivore, which I did not care for my reading of the book. There were things about it that, I don't know, it didn't really work for me as far as the way it was written, as far as the characters, because it's very much, you have 3 characters in the book. One is an omnivore, one is a carnivore, one is an herbivore, i.e. one is a human being who eats everything, one is a vegetarian, and one only eats meat. Now, what the book explored was really interesting, and it's really stuck with me. There are still times, I read this book probably about 10 years ago now, and there are still times when things about this book come to mind, and I think about things that were in the book. It's a really interesting concept that he explored, but I didn't care for the actual writing, and I didn't care for certain aspects of the story. So I've never picked up anything else by him. However, that being said, he is your 6th choice. So if there's another book out there that you really want me to read, feel free to vote for it. Option number 7 is Blake Crouch. And the only book I've read by him is Dark Matter, which I feel like most people, if they've only read one book by him, that's the book that they've read. I know he's also written Recursion and I don't remember the names of any of his other books. I really enjoyed Dark Matter. I feel like most people I heard talk about Recursion said that there were a lot of similarities between it and Dark Matter. I don't know if it's in like the twists and turns or how the story plays out. I'm not really sure, but that's what I've heard. So I just never felt inclined to pick it up. But Blake Crouch is your next option. The 8th option is Phillip K. Dick, and the only book I've read by him is Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, which is quite different from the movie Blade Runner. Just saying. If I remember correctly, though, Phillip K. Dick actually liked the movie Blade Runner better than his own book, so if I also like it better, I'm just agreeing with the author. So, but I haven't read any more in that series, and I haven't read any of his other books. So he's another classic sci-fi author. I feel like Piers Anthony is fairly classic sci-fi, so that's the next author that you can choose from. All right, the last two are actually fantasy authors. I just realized I had a whole lot of sci-fi back to back. But the next one is Janie Chang. And I feel like a lot of people would probably look at her books and think that's historical fiction, not fantasy. But the one book I read by her was Dragon Springs Road, which I would argue is magical realism. Now, normally I would say magical realism isn't my thing, but I actually really enjoyed this book. But the only other book I really know by her is The Library of Legends. And I know she just came out with a book this year that she co-authored, I believe, with Kate Quinn. Both of them sound interesting, but they've never been high enough on my priority list to actually pick them up. I don't know if the book she wrote with Kate Quinn actually has magical realism or not. I'm pretty sure The Library of Legends does. So she's another one that you can choose from. And the last one is Elizabeth Lim. And I felt like I was going out on a limb with this one here, because the only book I've read by her is Reflection, which is part of the Twisted Tales in the Disney Hyperion series. That one I really enjoyed. I read one other book in the series. I liked the twist and I liked some aspects of the story, but I didn't care for the way it was written. This one I really enjoyed. I know, I just looked her up earlier and now I don't remember. I know she wrote Six Crimson Cranes and Spin the Dawn. That's the other one. I don't know for sure what other books she has out, but I know she at least has those, and they are both fantasy books. So Elizabeth Lim is the final choice for the first half. So to recap, for authors to vote on and to vote for specific books by them, if you have a specific book you want me to read by the author, your choices are Stephanie Meyer, Jennifer A. Nielsen, Garth Nix, Kim Stanley Robinson, Veronica Roth, Piers Anthony, Blake Crouch, Phillip K. Dick, Janie Chang, and Elizabeth Lim. Now we'll get to the part that I have a feeling more people are going to be interested in, because as I'm looking at the list, I feel like there's a lot more series here that people have an interest in than maybe the authors, but I guess we'll see. I have no idea what you guys are interested in, so I guess we'll find out. But these are 10 series that I started and never finished that you guys can vote on if you want me to read the next book in the series. I will also say, though, these are divided up into 2 groups. I have 7 that if you vote for them, I will read the next book in the series, and I have 3 that if you vote for them, I will reread the first book in the series, because it's been so long since I've read them, I don't remember them well enough to continue with the series. So actually, let's just start with those 3. So the first one is The Inheritance Cycle by Christopher Paolini. And the first book is Aragon. I read this one, has to be 10 or 15 years ago. I remember liking it at the time, but I remember virtually nothing from this book at this point. I know the main character finds a dragon or a dragon egg. I know the dragon can, I feel like, either talk or talk through its thoughts. I don't remember exactly, but I know it communicates somehow. And there's like an image from one scene, 1 or 2 scenes that's in my head, and that's about it. So that one I would need to reread if I were to potentially continue on with the Inheritance Cycle. All right, the next one is the Seven Realms series by Cinda Williams Chima. And I read the first book, I want to say it's called The Demon King, several years ago. I liked the plot of the story. I liked the world building and everything. I thought it was really well done. But there were a lot of issues I had with the book at the time I read it that were more related to just a ton of editing issues. Just a lot of things that got missed. And unfortunately, it hindered my enjoyment of the book because there were continuity issues, there were spelling issues, there were grammar issues, and not just they put the comma in the wrong spot or something, but like there were extra words that shouldn't have been there, or words got flipped around so they're in the wrong order and it doesn't read right. So I would have to stop and read the sentence over several times to figure out what it was supposed to say. And unfortunately, it just affected my enjoyment of the book to where I didn't really want to pick up the next one. But if you would like me to reread this one and give the series another try, you can vote for that one. And the last of the series I started that I would need to start over is Artemis Fowl by Owen Colfer. I don't know why I thought that was his last name. Owen Colfer. This one, I remember being really popular when I was in high school. A lot of people were reading this series. However, I did not get into it at that point, and when I did finally pick up the first book, I just thought it was okay. But again, I know it's a really well-loved series, so if you would like me to give it another try, you can vote for this one. All right, the rest of these are ones that I started, but I didn't finish. Most of these have several books left in them. I think only 2 of them have 1 book left that I would need to read. The first one is The Passage by Justin Cronin. I read the first 2 books in this, The Passage and The 12. I really enjoyed it at the time that I read it, but I think I also read The 12 around the time that I was kind of starting to question some of the content that I was reading, and never went back and picked up City of Mirrors. There's part of me that's still interested in finishing the series, but I haven't made it a priority to actually pick it up and read it. But I am still really curious to know how it ends, considering I already read 2/3 of it. So that is the first option for those. The next one is The Traitor's Sun Cycle by Miles Cameron. I read the first 2 books in this series, which are The Red Knight and The Fell Sword. And I loved those books. They are so well written. There's so much going on. It takes its influence from Arthurian legend, but it does something completely different with it. And I really enjoyed it. There is so much to this series. Unfortunately, that also goes for the content in the book, which is again coming at a time that I was really questioning content that I was reading in books, but the books are just so well written. And there's so much depth to the stories. I'd like to know how it finishes, how it ends. There are 5 books in the series, so there are 3 more I haven't read. So that one is your next choice. The next one is The Circle by Dave Eggers, I believe is his name. I did not realize until the other day that there is a second book in this series. Now, The Circle, I personally have described as a modern day 1984. And if you've read 1984 and you've read The Circle, you probably also understand part of the reason I made that connection. Now, there definitely was content in this book that I was not keen to read, I will be honest, which is probably why I would hesitate to read the second book in this series. But considering I only just found out that there is a second book, I'm curious. And it is from a different perspective. So, yeah. Part of me is curious. I just don't know if I'm curious enough to pick it up on my own. All right, the next book I know is extremely popular. The book is popular, the series is popular. But I've only read the first book, and I've been unsure if I'm overly ambitious about picking up the rest of the series, and that is Dune by Frank Herbert. And I know there's a couple people who watch these videos that I just heard scream in pain because I said I'm not sure I want to continue the series. However, I did enjoy my reading of the first book. I'm on the fence about do I want to continue with the series or not. So If you would like me to continue with this series, you can vote for this one. The next one is A Wrinkle in Time by Madeleine L'Engle, and I'm assuming that's the name of the series and not just the first book, but I don't know. I think actually the series is The Time Quartet. I take it back. A Wrinkle in Time is the only one that I've read. Unfortunately, when I read it in high school, I found it very dry and kind of boring to read and was not overly inclined to read any other books in the series. I own the next 3 books. They're on my bookshelf over there out of camera view, but I don't own the 4th one anymore because I was kind of advised against it when I did my own research. I decided the person was right to advise me and I got rid of it. So thank you, Dia. But I do own the other 2 books. So, and I feel like I remember the first book well enough, even at this point, that I could just continue with the series. So if you would like me to continue on with Wrinkle of Time, that's your next choice. All right, there's 2 more left. So the next one is The Giver by Lois Lowry. I did really enjoy The Giver. However, my main hesitancy with continuing this series is the fact that I've heard the other books are companions. They don't just continue on from the first book. And also, the endings of all of the books are ambivalent the same way the first book is, even the 4th one in the quartet. So I don't know for sure that I really want to continue with this one, if that's the case. But if you have read it and really like the books and want me to continue on with it, you can vote for this one. All right, and the last one is a middle grade fantasy, which I guess technically The Giver, actually that's more middle grade sci-fi, and A Wrinkle in Time is middle grade sci-fi. I want to call it fantasy, but it's time travel, that's sci-fi. But that is Pages & Co. by Anna James, or The Book Wanderers if you want to go with the name of the first book. This one I read a few years ago, and there were parts of the story that I liked, but it took way too long to get past the introductory, this is how book wandering works, and this is how the world works when there are book wanderers, to get to the actual plot of the story. Because I remember reading the book and just thinking, okay, it's enjoyable enough to read, but why don't I feel that drawn in? And eventually realized, because we haven't gotten to the plot of the story. The main plot, what's actually driving the characters. It took at least half, if not more than half of the book to get to that point. So the later books might be better because the world's been established and we can just set up a new plot, but I don't know. So that's the next one that you can, actually you shouldn't say the next one, that's the last one of these 10 that you can vote on. All right, so quick recap on those. If you want me to continue with one of these series, your choices are Aragon by Christopher Paolini, 7 Realms by Cinda Williams-Chima, Artemis Fowl by Owen Colfer. Those 3 I would need to reread the first book, but the rest of these I can continue on with the series. The next ones are The Passage by Justin Cronin, Trader's Son Cycle by Miles Cameron, The Circle by Dave Eggers, Dune by Frank Herbert, A Wrinkle in Time by Madeleine L'Engle, The Giver by Lois Lowry, and Pages & Co. by Anna James. Yeah, this is a bit of a long list, but again, you have 2 different categories you can vote in. You can vote for an author that I've read 1 book or 1 series by, and which book of theirs you want me to read next. And then you can also vote for a sci-fi fantasy series that I have started, but not finished, that you want me to continue with. So, I will have a list of everything that you can vote on and all of the information down in the description below. So if you're unsure about anything, check that out. Or if you don't remember some of the names or books that I listed, they will be down in the description for you to check out. And again, you have until the end of August to vote, August 31st at 11:59 p.m. Central Standard Time, because that's the time zone I'm in, is how long you have to vote. And I will be tallying up the votes on September 1st, and I will let you know, probably in a community post, which book it is that I'm going to be reading, so that way you guys know what won the votes. And I will have until the end of November to finish at least 1, but hopefully both of the books that you guys vote on. My throat is getting dry after all this talking. So that's all I have for you guys today. Make sure you vote. And as always, I hope you're having a wonderful day, and I'll see you later.